Picture this. You are a Roman soldier, standing on a thin strip of dirt in the middle of Gaul. And on one side of you are 80,000 starving warriors who want nothing more than to rip you apart. On the other side, marching toward your back, is an army so massive that ancient writers claimed it topped 250,000 men. You have no way out, no reinforcements coming, just a wooden fence, a ditch full of sharpened branches, and the terrifying math of being outnumbered 5-1. And the man who put you here, the man who somehow thought this was a winning move, is Julius Caesar. This is the story of the Battle of Alesia, and by every normal rule of warfare, it should have ended in disaster.
To understand how Caesar ended up trapped between two armies, you have to rewind a few years. By 52 BCE, Caesar had already spent 6 brutal years conquering Gaul, dragging his legions through modern France, Belgium, parts of Germany, and even across the sea into Britain. Every summer meant new villages burned, new tribes crushed, and new land swallowed into Rome's growing empire. Back home, his reputation was exploding, and every fresh conquest added more fuel to his legend. But the people actually living through this conquest were not impressed. Their grain was stolen, their leaders replaced with Roman puppets, and their homes turned to ash year after year with no end in sight.
What the Gauls lacked wasn't courage, it was unity. And that changed when a young nobleman named Vercingetorix stepped forward. He was sharp, magnetic, and unlike other tribal leaders, he understood something crucial. Charging Roman legions head-on in open battle was a losing game every single time. So instead, he built a strategy around starving the Romans out. Burn the crops, torch the villages, leave nothing behind for Caesar's men to eat or shelter in. It was ruthless, even against his own people. But it worked. Roman supply lines began collapsing. Foraging parties were ambushed in the forests, and momentum shifted hard in favor of the rebellion. Word spread fast, and tribes that had been sitting quietly on the sidelines began joining the fight. Even the Aedi, one of Rome's most loyal Gallic allies for years, switched sides completely, which was about as clear a warning sign as Caesar could get. Vercingetorix was turning into exactly the threat Rome had feared for years, a unified enemy with an actual plan instead of scattered, disorganized resistance. And then came Gergovia, a fortified hilltop town where Caesar made a rare and costly mistake. His soldiers pushed too far up the slopes, got cut off from support, and were driven back with brutal losses. Nearly 700 legionaries died at Gergovia, including 46 centurions. And that second number mattered more than people realize. Centurions were the backbone of the Roman war machine, the seasoned veterans who kept panicking recruits in line during the chaos of battle. Losing 46 of them in one afternoon sent shockwaves through the entire army, and more dangerously, through all of Gaul. The message was simple and electric. Rome could bleed. Caesar was not unbeatable after all. Chiefs who would quiet. But Caesar was not the type of commander who sat around licking his wounds. He regrouped fast, brought in Germanic cavalry mercenaries to strengthen his forces, and went hunting for Vercingetorix again. When the two sides clashed in a cavalry battle, Caesar's Germanic horsemen absolutely dismantled the Gallic cavalry. And that defeat pushed Vercingetorix into a decision that would define the rest of the war. He pulled back with roughly 80,000 warriors to a hilltop stronghold called Alesia, a place with steep slopes, rivers running through the surrounding valleys, and enough space on top to hold his entire army, along with the local townspeople. Vercingetorix had every reason to feel confident. He had high ground, solid walls, and stored supplies. And he sent riders racing across Gaul, begging every remaining tribe to send warriors for one final, decisive relief effort. His plan was elegantly simple. Hold the fortress, wait for backup, then crush Caesar between two forces at once. It was a smart plan, arguably his best option available, but it rested entirely on one assumption: that no sane commander would dare besiege a mountain fortress while 250,000 build. Over the next 3 weeks, Roman legionaries constructed one of the most audacious engineering feats in ancient military history: an 18-kilometer ring of walls, trenches, and watchtowers completely encircling the hill of Alesia. These men were not just soldiers. They were trained engineers who could raise a fortified camp from nothing in a single day. And now Caesar was asking for something on a completely different scale. The inner wall alone included 2 water-filled trenches, a 4-meter-high rampart topped with sharpened stakes, and watchtowers spaced every 24 meters, all designed to turn any breakout attempt into a suicide mission. Hidden pits filled with sharpened branches, nicknamed lilies for their flower-like shape, dotted the ground in front of the trenches, alongside buried iron hooks meant to rip apart anyone charging through. Then, Caesar learned the size of the incoming relief army, and instead of retreating, he ordered a second wall built facing outward. 21 kilometers of identical defenses designed to stop an attack from behind. Think about the sheer insanity of that decision for a moment. 60,000 Roman soldiers were now standing inside a corridor of their own construction. 80,000 starving Gauls trapped on one side, and 250,000 reinforcements closing in from the other, with nearly 40 kilometers of wall to defend between them. Here is the part most people miss. The part that made this insane gamble actually work. Walls are force multipliers. A smaller army behind strong fortifications can hold off a far larger force because attackers get funneled into narrow kill zones, while defenders concentrate their strength exactly where it's needed. Caesar wasn't trapped. He had essentially built a fortress inside a fortress, and he was daring the largest army Gaul could assemble to try and break it. Meanwhile, inside Alesia, food was running out fast, and Vercingetorix had 80,000 mouths to feed, with grain meant to last only weeks, not months. The desperation grew so extreme that, according to some accounts, one chieftain even suggested eating the bodies of those too weak or old to fight, a claim that may be Roman propaganda, but reflects just how dire things had become. Vercingetorix tried sending civilians, the women, children, and elderly of Alesia, out through Roman lines to save food for his warriors, hoping Caesar would let them pass. Caesar refused, leaving them stranded and starving in the open ground between both armies. A brutal but calculated move that crushed morale inside the fortress, while sending a clear message to the approaching relief force: hurry or your people die. When the relief army finally arrived, chaos erupted on 2 fronts at once. Vercingetorix launched a breakout attempt from inside, while the massive outer army slammed into Caesar's second wall,
forcing Roman soldiers to fight in total darkness on both sides simultaneously. Somehow, through sheer discipline and the grim knowledge that there was nowhere left to retreat, the Romans held their ground through that first brutal night. But the Gauls had learned something valuable from the attempt. They had found a weak spot along the northern section of the wall, a gap created by uneven terrain that Caesar's engineers simply couldn't fully close. The Gauls sent 60,000 of their strongest warriors on a flanking march to hit that exact weak point while attacking everywhere else at once. And this single moment became the true turning point of the entire siege. If that northern gap collapsed, the whole fortification system would crumble, the Roman army would be wiped out, and the future of Western Europe would look completely different today. The two legions defending that section were being overwhelmed fast. Reserves were running dry, and Caesar himself rode along the wall in his unmistakable red cloak, personally rallying exhausted soldiers at the most critical breaking points. With the northern camp on the verge of falling, Caesar sent his best general, Titus Labienus, with 6 cohorts and one final order: hold the line no matter what. Then Caesar played his last card. He gathered his remaining cavalry, including the fierce Germanic horsemen he had recruited earlier, and sent them on a wide loop around the outside of the battlefield. While the Gallic warriors were fully focused on smashing through the northern gap, this cavalry force came thundering in from behind, catching them completely off guard, trapped exactly like the Romans had been trapped only hours earlier. The Gallic assault collapsed instantly, and panic spread through the rest of the relief army as their finest warriors were cut down while fleeing. A force that had looked unstoppable just hours before simply disintegrated, scattering into the countryside and abandoning the siege entirely. From the hilltop, Vercingetorix watched his last hope vanish in real time, and he understood immediately that the war was over. The next day, he rode out of Alesia's gates alone in his finest armor, circled Caesar's platform, dismounted, and laid down his weapons in silence, officially surrendering himself, and with him, all of Gaul. Vercingetorix spent 6 years as a Roman prisoner before being executed, a harsh but standard fate for defeated enemy leaders in that era. Alesia effectively crushed organized Gallic resistance for good, and Gaul became a Roman province for the next 500 years. Its language, culture, and roads reshaped so thoroughly that modern French still carries the fingerprints of that conquest. For Caesar, this victory made him unimaginably wealthy and gave him an army of battle-hardened veterans who were loyal to him personally rather than to Rome itself. A combination that would eventually push him to cross the Rubicon and plunge the entire republic into civil war. What makes Alesia so remarkable, even 2,000 years later, isn't just the scale of the engineering or the size of the armies involved. It's the sheer audacity of the decision itself. Caesar looked at a situation that any rational commander would have fled from immediately and chose instead to build his way out of it, trench by trench, wall by wall, using preparation and discipline instead of luck. Archaeologists have since confirmed nearly every detail of his own account, finding the trenches, the lily pits, and weapon fragments still buried in the soil of Burgundy exactly where he described them. Alesia endures in military textbooks today because it proves something timeless about strategy and nerve. That sometimes the most dangerous move you can make against an enemy
is to let them believe they already have you exactly where they want you.